Madam Chair, this is Commissioner Parkins. Is this meeting being broadcast live as well?
It's getting connected. Alex is working on that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, John. Good, thank you. Okay. Bye.
Very good. Okay. I'm gonna start today.
Join the meeting.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Virginia Harger, Chairperson of the Shelton Planning and Zoning Commission. Today is Wednesday, July 8th, and the special meeting of the Shelton Planning and Zoning Commission is hereby called to order. This meeting is categorized as a special meeting and is being held at a time other than when our regular meeting would be scheduled. Would everyone present in the auditorium please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, and invite all who are participating remotely to do the same. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. I'll start with our roll call. When your name is called, please verbally indicate you're present, and I'll begin with those who indicated they would be participating remotely. Commissioner Parkins?
Present.
Commissioner Ticky?
Present.
Commissioner Wodanski? Okay, alternate Commissioner Lasko?
Here.
Okay, and Commissioner Lasko should be sitting in for Commissioner Wodanski, who indicated he was not present. Our communication consultant, Mr. Panico,
I'm here.
and I'll, for the record, to state that alternate Commissioner Usel indicated to me he would not be able to participate in today's meeting. I'll continue with roll call with those who are in the auditorium. Commissioner Kelly?
Present.
Commissioner Motto? Myself, Commissioner Harger. Our P&Z Administrator, Mr. Rossetti. Our Assistant P&Z Administrator, ZEO, Mr. O'Neill, was in the room, but he left, so I will acknowledge him when he gets in. Mr. Nappy is not here. Our Recording Secretary, Sarah Renato. Our Stenographer, Stephanie Charbonneau. Points before continuing with this morning's agenda. This is the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting being done via a live process. In person and remotely will be able to make comments throughout the meeting. That we are talking across each other, and our recording secretary is clear. As to who is speaking, commissioners are asked to please say Madam Chair and then your name. As the chair recognizes you, you are free to speak. Please be aware. Echo. Commissioners participating remotely are asked to be aware and remember that the microphones on which will will be heard in the auditorium throughout the PA system, including movement of papers, phones ringing, and conversations in the room. So hit out all possible, and if you have the ability to do so, please mute the audio on your computers. First agenda item is new business application 20-10, Dominic Thomas, for Stormies LLC, Stormies Bull and Barley at 350 Bridgeport Avenue, applying for a site plan modification for PDD number 57 to expand outdoor dining operations. Is there to accept application 20-10?
I'll make that motion.
There's a motion from Commissioner Kelly to accept application from 20-10. Is there a second? Second from Commissioner Amato. There's a motion to accept application 20-10 from Commissioner Kelly, seconded by Commissioner Amato. To a roll call vote. Commissioner Lasko? Commissioner Lasko, are you there?
Yes.
They were voting on the motion 20-10. Did you say that your vote is an aye?
Could you repeat that?
We are voting on a motion to accept application 20-10. How do you vote on that?
Aye.
Okay, Commissioner Kelly?
Aye.
Commissioner Parkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Amato? Commissioner Tiki?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. So the applicant is present and ready to present the proposals. Attorney Thomas?
Thank you. Attorney Dominic Thomas, Coleman Thomas, 350 Main Street, Connecticut, representing the applicant. Prior to my becoming involved in this specific matter, the restaurant came in accordance with the shelving regulations, the orders, and obtained permission to have a temporary outdoor patio in the neighborhood, expanding the one that you approved a couple of years ago along the south side of the building, and also expanding, putting it in the front, covering both their leasehold space and the adjacent empty space next door.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, they approached your staff with the idea, as is happening with a lot of restaurants, to permanently expand the outside patios. So what we've submitted here is a plan, and on the sheet entitled, best to describe it, the patio along the south side of the building, or the side facing the Frontier building, or the Frontier property, I should say. That patio that exists there would be expanded to take it from the handicap spaces all the way to the back. The fencing that is there existing would be expanding. It would be similar type fencing, and it would, which was approved by this commission a couple of years ago. And that would be expanded to take it back. In addition, the area in front of their leasehold interest, in other words, it's not the entire temporary patio that currently exists, but the area that is in front of the restaurant on the very large sidewalk that is in front would be the patio area. And if you look at the things that are posted on your website, they do want to do a slightly different type of fencing. I believe it's modeled after the Aruba fencing. So you see there that there's a photo that was submitted to show you better the black anodized aluminum 4-foot fencing that will be used in the front. I did receive a comment. I don't know, I'm losing track. I told people now the days of the week are day, and day. So I'm not sure whether it was Monday or Tuesday I received a comment that essentially addressed the issue of leaving a pedestrian way along the front of the sidewalk. It's some form of pedestrian way. This is a corner lot, and we certainly address that. I will state for the record that the architect who designed the patios is on the phone. We acknowledge David Elias. So if you have any questions with respect to the plan and that, you can address them also to, Mr. Elias that's on the phone. And I would conclude by saying that, this may not be the first application for a expanded outdoor service, which is, I think, going to be something you're going to see a lot more of with existing restaurants. With that, I turn it over for any questions.
Attorney Thomas, has this been presented to Fire Marshal for his review?
It normally wouldn't go to the fire marshal until after, to get any appropriate, we don't present it to the fire marshal. It normally goes to the fire marshal zoning staff, but it does go to the fire marshal if there's any building permits, any entrances and exits when they do go and build it, if it's appropriate. That we don't submit it to the fire marshal directly.
Mr. Rossetti, isn't that part of our outdoor dining reg, that it has to go to the fire marshal?
The things have been jumped up and down for, just for a letter.
Okay, so he...
Don't anticipate any issues in after a brief conversation with him.
The concern I have is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Attorney Thomas, the fencing on SK-2.
Excuse me, let me just get back to that.
Is the area above the word
Join the
patio
meeting.
with a little doorway that looks like a swinging gate kind of thing, and then it continues down, and then there's an opening. That is the way that people would enter the interior of the restaurant?
Tyler Gilsonen.
Join the meeting.
You're referring to SK2?
Yes.
And I did submit that, but I don't see it on the map. But Mr. Elias is on the phone. David, did you hear the question?
It's very garbled. I'll do my best to answer. I heard something about SK2 and what, was there some inconsistency? It's very difficult for me to understand what people are saying. So could you please repeat it and I'll try to answer?
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Elias, we were a little unhindered by our face masks. Is this any better?
A little bit, but go ahead.
All right, let me just pull the unit a little closer. Okay, on SK2, bottom left-hand corner of the area that is identified as patio.
Okay.
That is a little opening, and is that the
Correct.
only opening from the parking lot that patrons would have to access the interior of the restaurant?
If patrons wish to enter the restaurant, the interior, they would first have to go through that opening in the lower, which would be the southwest corner, through the patio, and then into the restaurant. Correct.
Because that's just my concern as for emergency exit and entrances, and that's why I brought up as to whether or not the fire had weighed in on this at all. I see that at the opposite end, you do have like a swinging kind of gate or doorway, and the same thing on the lower side of SK2 where it says existing patio. There is another, to the left of that, there is another swinging gate. So those are exits only, usually. Is that what the intention was? People cannot enter into the patios on those two swinging gates. Those are supposed to be for exits only.
Okay, that is correct. The patio along the south side, which is being expanded, has two means of egress. Basically, when you have an enclosed patio, from a building code point of view, the building code would look at it as if that's part of the building. And therefore, if you exceed 50 occupants there, which we do based on a building code, we would need two means of egress to get out. Now, when you enter the patio, that south side patio, it would have to be from inside the building, not from the outside. That is simply in case there's a potential fire or something, the patrons would not be enclosed within a fenced-in area and can escape to the parking lot.
Exactly. Okay. So there are two exits from the patio that's under consideration for expansion on the south side, and there's two on the patio on the other corner of the, and one is a gated one and one is just, wide open. What's the width of the opening from the parking lot to the non-gated?
I think you asked me a question about the other patio. The other patio has one large opening, which would be the general entrance to get into the patio and the restaurant. And if you'll notice along the north side, there's another door there. Again, for the same reason. That is simply an egress door. It's not meant for patrons to enter there. Simply, if there is a fire somewhere outside in a patio, they have two means of egress to get out and get into just the general parking area.
Yeah, Mr. Elias, I understand that. I was just asking, what's the size of the opening, the main opening that is from the parking lot?
Okay. The sizes of the gates on the south patio, they're 3 feet 2 inches wide, which is kind of from the manufacturer. By code, they'd have to be minimum 3 feet. And the patio on the lower left-hand side, yes, that is. I'm gonna zoom in on the drawing here. It's 4 foot 2 inches wide.
Okay, the opening without the gate is 4 feet 2 inches wide. Okay.
In the lower left-hand corner, correct. That is center line to center line of the post. So in reality, it's actually 4 foot 0 open.
Okay. For wide opening. All right.
That's 3'6".
Okay, and any of the commissioners have any questions? Use your microphone. Commissioner Amato has a question.
I didn't understand what you said about a walkway, and also what is the seating capacity?
I can refer to Mr. Lex. The capacity, it would be based on whatever the fire code is, as you said, it's treated as part of the thing. There was an issue raised, I think, by Mr. O'Neill when the plans were first submitted along the front of the building as to whether or not, there was a need for a walkway along there. The only issue that I see is you're not traversing. In other words, there aren't stores on the south side of it. You know what I mean? You're not going, I guess the best example I could give is Taco Company. Taco Company, if you weren't going to Taco Company, you would walk by Taco Company and go from the liquor store to Maddox, or from the liquor store to things. In this case, this is the end unit. So I don't see the need for the sidewalk, but certainly it was raised by your staff as whether or not our response is, I don't see the need to have a sidewalk thing. People park in the parking lot, and they're gonna go in through the open.
Mr. Attorney Thomas, there are parking spaces along the south side across the driveway. This whole area that is off of the site plan are lined parking spaces. So if anybody parks there and they need to walk to Planet Pizza or a liquor store or something, they're going to be walking along the parking lot, the lined spaces to the left.
Yes, I suppose that people do park.
So,
I mean, there's an abundance of parking in front.
right.
I was shocked one day when I drove by, because I've never seen that parking lot full. And I was shocked one day when I drove by and it was full. And it was full of all cars from out of state, and I was wondering what was going on. It was when Hertz shut down during the pandemic. All the cars were being stored in that parking lot. But that's the only time I ever saw that it be full. But yes, you're correct. If someone did choose to park on the south end spaces, which are almost never full except for people attending Bull and Barley.
Right, but I can see where Mr. O'Neill is coming from, and I certainly agree that I think that
Well,
something
certainly willing to work with staff on that.
yeah, I definitely would.
Yeah.
Commissioner Kelly had a question?
Yeah, I do. From what I understand with this drawing, there are two distinct patios, am I correct?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and to get into the building, you go through the main patio in the front.
Correct.
Okay, I would also like to see some sort of a walkway coming through. Now, there's no canopy or anything, correct? It's just umbrellas or what?
Actually, I can answer that question. If you'll notice, I guess either on any drawing, but I'm looking at A2. If you'll notice, there are 3 squares going north and south. There is a roof over that part. So I would say if you're coming in, maybe half the distance before you get into the building is covered.
Yeah, there is an overhang of the building?
Yeah, the overhang, okay.
Correct, yes, that's the overhang in the building.
How about the rest of the patio? No, right? It's just umbrellas, tables, umbrellas?
If you're entering that 4-foot opening in the southwest corner, you would probably go about, let me zoom in here, you'd go about 15 feet in, say, without covering overhead before you would go underneath a roof that would then still be outside, but you would be covered, and then you would go into the building.
I know that, but beyond that, with that 15 feet before you get through into the under part of the canopy, there's going to be chairs, I would assume, and tables. Is there going to be umbrellas there?
More than likely.
I believe so, because I think on the existing patio, I went back there, I noticed they did have umbrellas, individual umbrellas for every table.
All right, and there will be no canopy over the existing patio?
Well, there's no, I don't believe there's any intention right now. I don't know what's out there right now. Maybe temporarily. I think that there is one in case patrons are dining, because of COVID-19, that they can still dine even in the rain. So I think there is a 2 tents out there right now, but the future is not meant to have a tent there, no.
I think, if in fact they want to put a permanent, as I see being constructed on a couple of things right now, a permanent, probably an extended over the whole patio, top of it, then they would have to come back beyond what's shown on the plan.
Why I'm asking that is that if there is, then you put sides on it, you're going to need exits and emergency lights and so on and so forth.
Well, okay.
Am I correct?
If you, as you explained, the exit is still governed by whether it's open or closed, we still have to have the fire exit. That's what you said before. So that's why we have the 2 exits. If in fact you enclose it depends on what you're talking about in closing. So for instance, what a lot of them are adopting right now are these quickly assemblable, I don't know what you want to call it, tent, you know what I mean? That you just pop up into the tent, it's the plastic sides. The plastic sides cannot interfere with, they have to have the opening to get out. Those are like temporary. Those are like putting up a giant umbrella. You know what I mean? And everything like that. But they have the sides that drop down to prevent the rain from coming in sideways. Right now, they haven't discussed with me doing that. But if they did that, they cannot interfere with the fire exits or anything like that.
No, I'm not talking about with the fire. I'm talking about a means of egress. And if they're there at night, they lose power or something. Don't they have to have, for building code, if they have signs on it, temporary emergency lighting and exits?
I couldn't answer that question.
Well, they're going. Okay, I can answer that question. On the exterior of the building, there should be exterior lighting to get you to what's called a public space. So there may not be individual lights directly over, but there would have to be lights on the building that would shine the path, a lit path, so you would be able to get out to the parking lot.
It would have to probably be in either a battery-operated emergency circuit or a generator emergency circuit.
Yes, they would. I'm putting it.
One way or the other.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Is there any other commissioners, before I go on with comments that I have any comments that they would like to weigh in on?
Madam Chairman,
Go right ahead, Mr. Panico.
my major concern is that in the expansion of the side patio towards the rear, they are eliminating the curb that presently defines the travel path, the edge of the travel path for vehicles. And the net result is going to be a sharp 90-degree turn with no radius. That could be problematic for anything larger than a passenger car.
Okay, thank you. That's so noted. Okay, Commissioners Parkins or Ticky, do you have any comments?
Madam Chair, my only question is, I was under the understanding that entrances to such patios where liquor is being served is, requires that there either be a hostess stand or that you have to access it from the inside of the facility. I don't know if that's been relaxed over the, with the COVID situation, but that was my understanding from years ago. So I'm not sure if that still applies and if they've checked with the Liquor Commission on this plan.
Okay, thank you, that's so noted.
Yeah, and it would be subject, obviously, to our complying with all those requirements.
Okay. I definitely understand what Commissioner Parkins is bringing up about entry is only available to the patio from inside the restaurant. That's been a long standing, so I think staff will need to make sure that the applicant it would be in conformance with that. There is no problem with that having to do with the patio on the south side of the building, which is indicated to be 20 feet wide, 20 feet 6 inches wide, and 78 feet 7 inches long. I personally feel that there definitely needs to be a sidewalk in front of the west side patio. And if those regulations do still exist, that there can only be entry inside from inside the building, then there's got to be some kind of adjustment to the layout of this particular west side patio.
Okay.
So I don't know if the commission feels that we should table this for the applicant to work with staff and work out those details and come back with a revised layout.
I think that would be the best.
Okay, Commissioner Kelly, you agree with that?
That would be the best if they work with staff.
Okay, and then Commissioner Motto?
I appreciate, Tony Maga about the, south corner.
Southeast corner.
We will,
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so is there a motion to table this particular application so that the applicant can work with staff and make the adjustments that we have discussed?
Would they be able to go forward, coming back here?
No.
No, you're meeting, you're meeting every week. The
Yeah.
response would be relatively short, so you can add it to whatever, once we get it done, I think hopefully you can add it to whatever meeting you're having at that point.
Okay. All right, is there a motion to table application 20-10? There's a motion to table from Commissioner Kelly. Is there a second? Second from Commissioner Amato. So on the motion to table application 20-10 from Commissioner Kelly, seconded by Commissioner Amato, do a roll call vote. Commissioner Tiki?
Aye.
Commissioner Parkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Amato?
Aye.
Commissioner Lasko?
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. So, staff will, put that back on the agenda when we have something, ready. And, I'm sure that you understand all the concerns that we have. Very good. Okay, next agenda item is continuation of a public hearing for application 20-09. And that particular application is Elevate at Shelton, Shelton Parrott Associates, 1 Parrott Drive. Assessors map 18, lot 16, applying for a zone change from IA2 to a planned development district on 8.178 acres for the development of 206 residential units with on-site parking. The initial concept development plans titled Elevate at Shelton, 1 Parrott Drive were prepared by Spath Bjorklund Associates, Inc., engineers, dated May 3rd, 2019. And before we proceed, I just like to remind those present and those watching from a remote location where we are in the public hearing protocol for this particular application. The protocol for public hearings was previously reviewed by Corporation Counsel, who indicated to me that it is compliant with the executive orders issued by the governor and fair for those attending in person or watching from a remote location. Chair would like to note for the record that the public hearing for application 20-09 opened on June 4th, 2020. At the June 4th public hearing for 2009, the applicant made his presentation, and the commission members had the opportunity to ask questions during and after the presentation. The applicant had the opportunity to answer those questions at that time or to wait until today's continuation. After the applicant completed his presentation at the June 4th public hearing and answered questions from the commission, members of the public present in the auditorium who wished to address the commission on that application were given the opportunity to do so. At the end of the public portion for application 20-09, the commission moved to keep the public hearing open. After the continuation of the public hearing on June 4th and until 24 hours prior to today's resumption of public hearing, members of the public had the ability to submit questions and comments to the zoning commission office via email, postal mail, or in person to the P&Z office. At today's resumption of the public hearing for application 20-09, any comments submitted from the public within the time frame for submission will be acknowledged for the record. The chair will then recognize anyone from the public who further wishes to address the commission on application 2009. Those from the public today who choose to address the commission need to clearly write their name and address on the sign-up sheet that is by the podium. To assist the recording secretary and stenographer when doing the minutes and transcript of the public hearing. And if memory serves me correctly, I don't have a copy of the minutes in front of me, but I believe there were only 2 members of the public that spoke back on June 4th. And members of the public addressing the commission need to be mindful of the following. All comments or questions are to be directed to the chair and to the chair only, not to the applicant and or his associates. No dialogue is permitted between the public and the applicant or any of the applicant's associates. All comments from the public should address the criteria of the zoning regulations. Unless a member of the public has new comments to or questions of the chair, members of the public are asked to briefly indicate whether or not they're in agreement with the previous speaker. Verbatim. And it is their turn. Members of the public are expected to practice appropriate etiquette.
Can I turn my phone off? I'm gonna turn it off. This must gotta be over, right?
Disruptive attendees have to leave. All members of the public who are in attendance today finish addressing the commission. The applicant will be given the opportunity to respond to public comments or questions. The chair will then ask if any member of the commission have any questions for the applicant. After any questions are presented by the commission, the applicant will be given the opportunity to answer those questions. After the applicant and or his associates have concluded the presentation, they've answered all questions and they've addressed all concerns from the commission and or public, and if no further information is needed by the commission, the chair will ask for a motion to close the public hearing. If the commission feels further information is needed, the chair will ask for a motion to keep the public hearing open. At a future meeting of the commission, after the public hearing has closed, the commission will discuss the specific application, and the chair will poll the commission for a consensus on how to proceed. And a reminder to the commission that once a public hearing has opened and until it is closed, commissioners are not permitted to make any public comment, discuss any part of the applicant's presentation, or receive additional information from anyone. So we'll begin with the continuation of the public hearing for application 20-09, Elevated Shelton. Chair would like to note for the record, 3 new documents for this application were placed on the city's website on July 2nd. One document is identified as floor plans and elevations. Another is identified as hearing presentation. And a third document is identified as S-1 layout. Mr. Rossetti, were any comments received from the public after the opening of the public hearing since our meeting on June 4th?
No.
Okay, so there's no correspondence to be read into the record. Are there any members of the public present that would like to present comments to the commission on this application? Are there any members of the public present that would like to present comments to the public on this application? Okay, there's no one that has signed up for that particular to address the commission, so we'll go on to the applicant.
Sure.
Attorney Rizzio?
Yes.
Okay.
Are we okay? I don't need to press the red button.
Just,
Put the mic up by your mouth. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
that sounds like a
There's a red button, I don't want to press it. Great. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Randy Rizzio, here representing One Pair Drive LLC. Happy to be before you with a continuation of this application. I believe at our previous public hearing, we did a complete overview of the project, walked you through the PPP that's proposed, and then I think our engineer, David Turpin, summed up most of his presentation with regards to the engineering. Dave Sullivan, who is our traffic engineer, I hope is should be on the call, and what we'd like to do is proceed to the traffic engineer, Arthur Collins, who's going to be the developer of the property, well-established residential developer, will take you through the elevations, floor plans, and their thinking and why this is such a perfect site for this project. And then I'll sum up and show how we believe this project is in compliance with your master plan, and basically it's 100% in compliance with the future land use plan for the town. Let's go to Dave Sullivan first. His traffic studies have all been submitted. They also, and parking studies, and they're also up on the screen. So David, I'll turn this over to you.
Mr. Sullivan, are you present?
I am here, Madam Chairman.
Okay, you have the floor. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Again, for the record, David Sullivan, I manage the Transportation and Traffic Planning Group at Milone and McBroom. We were asked to conduct a traffic study and a parking study for the application that's in front of you. I'll talk briefly about both of them and be happy to drill down on any additional details as you see fit. First, if you go to the next slide, Ray, the traffic study, the basic scope of our traffic study is to review the existing conditions. We know this area well, having worked on the Fountain Square project as well as the Perkin-Elmer project across the street. Then we look at what the future conditions would...
Join the meeting.
What the future conditions would call for in terms of traffic and the infrastructure conditions with and without this development coming to fruition. We then do a series of analyses and determine what the traffic impact would be, and ultimately look at the results of that impact analysis and develop a series of recommendations as appropriate. Next slide, Ray, please. This is just a brief summary of the site location. You can see it off of Parrott Drive. There's currently one large, I call it two industrial buildings, one that will be raised and replaced with this residential use, and one to remain, about 47,100 square feet of it to remain in its current use. The intersections we looked at were the intersections of Bridgeport Avenue with Parrott Drive, the Perkin-Elmer, Split Rock, CVS driveway intersection, and the intersection of Old Stratford Road, Commerce Drive, and Bridgeport Avenue. Next slide, please. I tried to summarize in one slide here some of the key findings. The first was how much traffic we anticipate will be generated by the 206 multifamily housing units. So you can see that there's between 75 and 90 trips. I will point out that in the process of staff review, there was a question that came about that, and we get this question quite often, that how do 206 units generate 75 or 90 vehicle trips? And I go through the explanation quite often. And what these numbers represent are the number of trips that come in the 1 hour period. So this isn't all the trips that would be generated by this development during the morning. It's the number of trips during the morning peak hour. And as you can appreciate, everybody has different schedules. Not as different as they are these days, but even back in pre-pandemic days, some people have a schedule which gets them to an office building at 8. Some have commutes that they need to leave their home at 7 o'clock. Some people are in the retail business going to work. Some people are their trips are based on education and getting their children to school. So these trips take place over a much larger period in the morning, and these numbers that we quote here are based on statistics that say during the peak commuter time during the morning, which is generally an hour somewhere between 7 and 9 a.m., how many trips would be added to that traffic flow. So I thought that was important to clarify right up front. The other thing on this table are the site distances. For the most part, 280 feet are required in terms of site distances. This is based on the posted speed limit on Parrott Drive. And you can see at all the driveways, we do get the 280 feet with one exception, and that is looking to the right from the south driveway. Now, this bears a little bit of explanation because when we measure the sight lines, it's not only the clear visibility, but we have to make sure that we're not going over private property when we're judging our view. As part of the Fountain Square project, as you're aware, the road is being widened to the Fountain Square side of the road. And what that does is it moves the vehicles coming up the hill closer to the Fountain Square property, and that property line actually shifts. What that causes is when you're looking at a car coming up, maybe taking a right turn, you can see that car, but for a short period of time, you're actually looking over the property line, which essentially is clear. So we didn't feel comfortable saying that you could see the 280-foot sight line, although you can. What we do identify is, which we think is more than adequate, is that you could see without any right-of-way encumbrance 225 feet, which is the distance you need for a vehicle traveling 20 miles an hour. And in this particular case, you are starting from either a stop or a slow roll, taking a right turn or left turn onto Parrott Drive, and are generally starting your trip up the hill at somewhere in the 10 to 15 mile an hour range. And then you accelerate as you go up the hill, but the speed through this area is, as you take that turn, is less than 20 miles an hour. So we felt comfortable that you could have a legal sight line of 225 feet, although practically speaking, you could see the vehicles as they enter Parrott Drive.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Can I ask Chairman Harder, the south driveway is intersection number 3. It's one of the 3 on that site distance chart. Isn't that the intersection where a traffic signal has been proposed?
Well, that is not the 3 driveways, and I should have been clearer. These are the 3 driveways on Parrott Drive to the development. So there's the southerly one is the one that will be located approximately opposite the Fountain Square driveway, and will give primary access to the residential portion of this site. I don't know if there's a site plan there you could point to, Ray, but it's where the pool and clubhouse area would be. It would be that driveway that we're talking about. So when you're looking right from that driveway, you're looking to intersection number 3 on that prior map.
Okay, so these are at the immediate site, not at the bottom of the hill past where Ruby Tuesdays used to be, where you would access Bridgeport Avenue.
Correct. And those sight lines are all at signalized intersections, and in fact, they've been looked at in the past and are fine. We looked at those, as well.
David, can I just, before we leave this, exhibit, with regard, it's Ray Rizzio, with regard to the trip generations, that is the total trip generations that you anticipate with regard to the 260 units, correct? But I just want
Yes.
I just want to point out to the commission, there will also be, because we're eliminating the approximately 50,000 square feet, that won't be a net increase, because there is a reduction of a building on the site, which would actually, so this is not a net increase of 75 per hour. You know what I'm saying, David?
Yes, I do. There is some latent demand if the other portion of the building that's being raised were to be reoccupied, there would be traffic associated with that occupation, and depending on the tenant, it would decrease these numbers to some degree.
Madam Chair, question?
Commissioner Kelly has a question?
Yes. It was mentioned that this is an increase including the 47,000 square foot building that's going to remain?
No. Commissioner Kelly, no. The traffic, that building is currently occupied, so that traffic is included in the base counts that were done. So we wouldn't add traffic because it's already been counted.
So how much traffic is that you didn't count?
If you bear with me, I could tell you precisely.
What is that? So you have that, plus you have Cintos building, and they use that road also. So, you do have 75 additional. Is there 75 additional after that? Maybe 150 total?
I lost you for a moment there. But let me get to the first question, and then if you can clarify the other one. What we have on the existing counts is during the morning that the existing building there generates somewhere between 10 and 15 trips. In the afternoon, it's around 20 trips. So that's how much the existing industrial building was generating during those peak periods.
Okay.
So that is already baked into the traffic data collection that we did. In terms of other development that may be latent demand, for instance, Fountain Square is not built yet. So what we do with the Fountain Square traffic is we add it into what we call the background. So we take the existing counts and we discuss with your staff as well as the staff at the Bureau of Policy and Planning at CONDOT and talk about what developments they have approved where there is some traffic that's going to affect our intersections. So we did that, and we add that to the existing counts we made, which is our background. After we have that background, which essentially is what would happen if nothing happened on this site, and everything was status quo on this site. And then we say, okay, let's say this development is approved, comes to fruition, and is built and opened and occupied, that we add to the background, and that becomes what we call our combined or build scenario. We then analyze the background scenario without this development and the combined scenario with this development and look at the results of the computer generated level of service analysis. Changes in I'm not sure if that fully answers your question or not.
Actually, what I'd like to know is the actual. You do have Renaissance, you have Cintos Office Tower 1, 2, which is right up on top. there's access in and out from Parrot Drive. Now, how much does that generate, the in and the out, which have to be added to what your new generation is going to be added to? That's what I'm
Okay,
trying. That's the total.
okay, so we have, when we did the traffic counts, we did also count how many are going past this site up to the end of the cul-de-sac, presumably into Cintos, and other things back there. And what we have, let me just get the actual numbers here, and I can give them to you. During the morning, there is 190 vehicle trips that go past this site up towards the back of the cul-de-sac and into the office complexes in Renaissance. And in the afternoon, there's 234 trips that come past this site. Of course, some coming.
Is that basically prime time or, you know, within your parameters of what the count you have?
Yes, those would be the commuter peak hours. So those would be the highest times typically for office buildings to enter and exit.
So basically, we would have to add the 75 and the 90 respectively on each morning and afternoon.
Yes, yes, precisely.
Okay. Thank you, Brad.
Okay. If we move into, I'm not sure what slide you're on now, but we could probably move 2 slides up to the level of service table, Ray. And when we look at that really summarizes 2 things. One, the level of service table shows that we're not impacting the overall levels of service at the 3 intersections along Bridgeport Avenue that we studied. You know, this is a summary of the entire intersection, but we do nonetheless have a couple of recommendations as we went through our analyses. The first one is the Bridgeport Avenue, Commerce Drive, Old Stratford Road. When we did the Perkin-Elmer site, we had identified that the traffic timing there could be improved, and that was a recommendation then. The recommendation stands here, particularly if the Perkin-Elmer site is not coming to fruition. So we recommend that that timing change be made. And secondly, the Bridgeport Avenue Parrot Drive, which is the new intersection, the new signal rather, at that intersection, the signal timing should be refined as it comes into operation. And that would be done anyway, but it should be sure to be looked at once this development is occupied and open. So that's the summary and the recommendations for the traffic. I'll jump quickly now into the parking study we did. And essentially, the parking study was 2-pronged. One, to evaluate what the parking demands realistically may be for a development such as this, and 2, do an analysis of the sharing of parking spaces. And for anyone that's not familiar with shared parking, the philosophy is that on mixed-use developments, many times the uses are compatible from a time standpoint, such as the same parking space could be used for both multiple land uses. In this particular case, for example, a parking space may be needed at night for the residential component, but there's nobody there in the day for that residential because it's left, and that space is vacant, and it could be used by the industrial uses on site. So that's the philosophy. So So what we did is we reviewed your zoning regulations, we reviewed what industry data might tell us for these uses, and we also reviewed data that we have in our files. Having done this for quite a few years, we have a substantial database, and then we conducted that shared parking analysis. So Ray, if you go to the next one, I'll jump right to the findings. So we suggest that the one-bedroom units have 1.5 spaces per unit, and the two-bedroom units have 2 spaces per unit. These numbers, these ratios, are significantly higher than industry data would tell us, and they're also higher than our own data would tell us, but they're more in line with regulations you have elsewhere in town. So we're very comfortable that these ratios are appropriate for this development. And then the last slide, right, is how the shared parking works. And what this does is it's mathematical formula that we can run throughout the day, and it tells us, for instance, if you look at the reddish, orangish color there, that's the number of parkers for the industrial use. And you can see at 7 a.m. before, as employees are just starting to arrive, it's low, and it peaks mid-morning, and then as people start leaving at 4 p.m., for example, the parking goes down for the industrial use, and when you get to 7 p.m. and midnight, there's nobody parking there for the industrial use. Conversely, the blue is the demand from the residential components, and you can see in the morning people are starting to leave. Throughout the day, you get lower and lower occupancy, but then when you get to midnight, everybody's back home, everybody's using their parking spaces, and the residential demand is at its peak. So we combine those for different times of day to determine what the total peak would be for the site, and compare that to the yellow line on top, which is the number of parking spaces being provided. As you can see, there's ample parking under this shared parking analysis. So that's our not so quick, but a summary of the parking and of the traffic. And I'd be happy to follow up with any other questions.
Do any commissioners have any questions for Mr. Sullivan? Commissioner Rada?
Or is it guest parking or overflow?
Commissioner Rada, could you repeat that again?
Is there any overflow parking, guest parking designated or needed?
Just bring the risk for the record, David, maybe you can expound on this. As you can see at the peak, we need 345 spaces, and we have 411 spaces. So it's more than adequate parking for guests. And, you know, typically, most towns in regulation like to see 10% reserved for guests. With 206 units, it would be basically 20 units. Even at our peak of all time, we have probably, which would be 20 to 21 spaces. We have over 65 spaces of additional parking available for our residents and the business.
And Ray, if I could chime in also, the statistics that we assemble and that the industry assembles includes visitor parking in the ratios that they determine. So they're not just counting cars of residents; they're counting all cars on the lots where they're counting. So theoretically, visitors are baked into these numbers. Where it does come into play, might be on especially high visitation days, Mother's Day, things like that, where, you might expect a little bit higher, and that's where I think a few extra visitor spaces would be useful, and in this case, we do have that.
Commissioner Mano, the commission suggested as a condition of approval, be willing, if the staff or the commission wanted to identify spaces reserved for visitor parking, we'd agree to that as a condition of approval.
Okay, was there, Commissioner Secchi or Commissioner Parkins, or Commissioner Lascos, did you have a question?
We're gonna be putting in some new camera software probably around August timeframe. We'll work out some training, and procedures to how to access it.
Madam Chair, this is Commissioner Parkins. I do have a question.
Okay, Commissioner Parkins.
I might have missed this, but just a couple of clarifications on the traffic study. When they refer to CVS Pharmacy, I believe they're referring to Walgreens Pharmacy? Because I'm not sure where there's a CVS yet in Shelton. And I also question why the intersection of Trap Falls Road and Bridgeport Avenue, which seems to be in closer proximity than Commerce Drive, why that was not included in the study.
Okay, so Attorney Rizzo and Mr. Sullivan, on that slide that is titled Future Traffic, the third bullet point is other developments, and I think that's what Commissioner Parkins has referred to. CVS is listed, but not Walgreens.
Yeah, the CVS, my understanding is this proposed. What it's identifying is the former Sears driveway. I thought that was going to be a CVS.
Yeah, that we're very much aware of, but across the street is Walgreens and Split Rock.
Yes.
What about particular complex?
That intersection accesses both Split Rock, Perkin-Elmer, and on the opposite side of the road, it accesses the former Sears or future CVS.
Okay, so the bullet point that is identified as CVS includes all the calculations required for the Split Rock complex.
Correct.
All right, and then Commissioner Parkins. Okay, and then Commissioner Parkins, your second question that you had has something to do as to why one particular intersection was studied. What was that again?
Was not studied. Trap Falls Road and Bridgeport Avenue.
When we start these processes, the initial guidance we use is what DOT and the Office of State Traffic Administration gives us, which is 100 trips to an intersection or 50 lefts at an intersection, and we use that as a guidance. And then we look at which intersections fall within those parameters or not. In this particular case, none of the intersections got us to any of those thresholds. So then we went to our second level of which intersections we should look at, and we looked at our distribution. And what we found is only about a third of the traffic will be heading in that direction. So the numbers of trips are in the 20 or so range, 20 to 30 range going in that direction, with very little turning movements at Trap Falls Road at all. So much lower than the 100. In the other direction, we come a little bit closer. So we did decide that it makes sense, let's include those intersections. Plus, we had the history of knowing that there's potential need for some timing adjustments up at Old Stratford Road. But for example, we have on the distribution 50 to 60% heading towards Commerce Drive. We have 10% going through the cul-de-sac over towards Commerce Drive in that direction, and only 35%, which would be taking a right out of Parrott Drive or a left into Parrott Drive. So that was our rationale for not analyzing that.
Okay, so is just make sure that we're all on the same page, the traffic flow of Bridgeport Avenue intersection was not studied because it did not fall within the requirements set by the CONDOT to be studied, but you went ahead and did the other three, even though they did not necessarily fall into it, but you included them because of the
Correct.
proximity.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, Commissioner Ticky, did you have any?
Yes, I do. I'm looking at the elevations and the floor plans, and I think what would be helpful is to have a rendering of what this might look like if you were on Bridgeport Ave or if you were on the street view. Everything that I'm seeing seems to be a bird's eye view or just the head-on elevations, but I think that would be helpful as we have with other developments to see a more real-life rendering of what this would look like from the street.
Okay, Commissioner Ticky, if you pull out, you should have been given the tabloid-sized sheets of paper, bottom right corner. They're prepared by Nowakowski, Obeemanchow, and Kane. It says map of property, and those are the site plans. And the page at the very end is designated as A-6, and that is something that shows an elevation. And if you're participating remotely up on the screen, is Mr. Attorney Rizzio, is that the same?
Yes.
That's the same one that's up on the screen.
Right, that's the elevation that you'll see from Bridgeport Avenue. The lower building where the lower parking lot is, and will be built, won't be seen from Bridgeport Avenue because of the grades. This is the upper building, let's call it the north building versus the south building. And this is what you would see as you would be coming, in effect, up Bridgeport Avenue and looking toward the building. You wouldn't see it coming, I want to say, toward downtown. You would see it only coming away from downtown because of the landscape and view. So this would be the elevation that you would see. We're coming from downtown toward Trumbull.
Yeah, Chairwoman, I see that. I was looking on our website, and that particular rendering I don't see there, but I see the screen here. I think I was going for a larger view of how this would compare with the larger area rather than just the building for relational.
I understand. So something that takes in a bigger cross-section of the property, basically, rather than an individual building.
Right.
Okay, let me just ask the applicant then, you have a page that's identified as A-111. It is prepared by Cambridge Hanover, and at the top it shows east side elevation, north side elevation, but that's only for one building. So, and page A-112, again shows north side and south side, but that's only for one building. I understand what Commissioner Ticky is getting at. So, is there anything that in the material that's been provided that would help?
Let me bring Mr. Collins up. Mr. Collins, as we leave are we leaving the portion related to traffic, I assume, and Mr. Collins, who's a developer?
Let me ask the commissioners, does anybody else have any questions about the traffic for Mr. Sullivan or Attorney Rizzio? Okay, Commissioner Lasko, you hadn't weighed in on anything. I don't know if it was because we couldn't hear you, but did you have any questions about the traffic?
No.
Thank you. Okay, so if there are any...
Chairwoman.
Go ahead, Commissioner Ticky.
Thank you. I just have a quick question on the traffic that may have been addressed, but it is sometimes a little cloudy to hear. But there's a cut through Parrott Drive to get up to the Renaissance, which some people do take, and you can cut through the Cinto corporate towers through the Parrott Drive. So has there been any comment from RD Cinto or the Parrott Drive about any concerns or thoughts about additional cars coming through that development to get to this proposed development?
Yes, this is Ray Rizzo from Becker. I spoke to Mark Cassano, who's president of RD Cinto, up prior to us filing this application, wanted to make sure they didn't have any issues with it with relating to traffic or with regard to having another, residential facility along Parrot Drive, and they didn't not have any objection to our project. Also evidenced by the fact that no one's here. But I did have a discussion with their president, Mark Pisano, prior to filing of our application. He said they didn't have any objection to it.
Okay, I would just ask the applicant.
Thank you.
Heading and submit that to staff, please. So we have a documentation of that conversation. Okay, so if there's no further traffic questions, then we would ask.
Yeah, I'd like to have call Arthur Collins.
Mr. Collins.
I spoke about in the presentation, very experienced developer along the entire eastern border coast. Projects as far south as Virginia, projects in Greenwich, Stamford, and he brings talent and quality of development. Arthur, tell you their vision here, take us through the elevation, floor plans. They think they'll take the lead to state why there's still the demand necessary for this type of project. Arthur, can you tell everybody a little about yourself?
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Commission, for listening to our presentation today. My name is Arthur Collins. I'm the president of Collins Enterprises. We've been working primarily down southern Fairfield County for many years, almost 50 years now. We've specialized in mixed use and infill projects such as this, where we have advanced shared parking and different types of land uses in infill urban areas in Fairfield County. We have a tremendous amount of experience in primarily transit-oriented development, both here and also in Mid-Atlantic, Virginia, and have this is a typical sort of project that will bring a demographic to Shelton, bring an option for Shelton residents that want to scale down, and sort of move into what we call a Class A apartment community that would have features such as underground parking, amenity space, balconies, and accessibility, not just stacked housing. So this we see as obviously there's going to be construction. We have adequate parking, as Dick Sullivan mentioned, and a shared arrangement with the existing commercial use. You also have in the site plan, we're basically proposing two buildings that more or less have 90 units in one and about 110 in the other. And in taking advantage of the grades, there's parking for about 110 cars underneath the buildings. And essentially, it's really not a garage as much as it is just an extended foundation wall height. So essentially, we're ending up with 4-story buildings on top of the foundation. Maximum building height would probably be in the 55-foot range. All the mechanical systems, the condensers, all that kind of thing would be off the grade and up on top of the roof. Look at the section, you'll see the sort of a well on the top of the building. And so you won't see any of that mechanical systems there. Plus the fact that we also propose an amenity building with swimming pool and so forth as you enter into on the south driveway. So we can actually, in a sense, call that south driveway the residential driveway, and then the commercial driveway would be to the north, for the commercial building. So some of the virtues here are that parking, a lot of it is concealed. You don't see it from the street. And this rendering here from Parrot Drive will be a typical sort of view of what these buildings would look like. Generally, with respect shingle style, some clapboard, some masonry, bay windows, as you see on the right-hand side there, and various features like that that sort of separate us from just a standard, you know, block and plank kind of apartment complex. So we'd like to actually build for a demographic that's looking to rent by choice rather than rent by necessity. And that is, means that they are coming because they like the idea that they have amenities, that they have adequate parking, that is convenient, and we also, I think Ray in the last meeting talked a little bit about the walkability here with the retail uses that are down on Bridgeport Avenue, Fountain Square, hopefully in the future. That, and we actually proposed, and we see in this rendering, sidewalks that are going to connect some of the uses along Barrett Drive. We talked to the neighbors off the road who testified at the last meeting, who are interested in the loading situation as well as we feel what's going to happen there, and also whether we can actually provide some pedestrian amenities in the sidewalk. We have revised our site plan, and we sent that to you, show a sidewalk, the length of the Barrett Drive property. So these have all the sort of metrics of a Class A residential community. As I said, parking's concealed. We have floor plans that are spacious with large windows, balconies, and so forth looking out. And we have taken advantage of the grades, helped to conceal the parking, as I mentioned, and provide amenities for these tenants.
The commission has questions, like so Mr. Collins, very experienced in this. Shelton, and this site in particular, was very attractive to them, and because it made sense. The project, you took a non-productive, at least 70% of the project of the site was non-productive. We have the ability to increase your tax base. We have the ability to service a different type of tenant than the town has been focusing on downtown, where you have a lack of amenities, usually a lot less parking. For example, I think your Howe Avenue project that was recently approved had 70-something units and 2,000 square feet of retail and had only 92 parking spaces. So people feel, and what's also very important is, in a lot of the projects that we've seen and done, and the tenants, is living in the, having covered parking, having parking where you can park inside, you're not subject to the weather. We're looking at an older demographic. People want to feel comfortable that in the rain, in the snow, in November, all the way through May, or actually even in the summer, that their car's not baking out in 90-degree weather, that they have covered parking available to them. And we think that's important. So it's a totally different tenant and demographic that we're attracting than what you see downtown. They build high-quality projects, I believe, in Arlington, Virginia, some of the nicest, Stamford, Greenwich, Norwalk. This is as your future land use plan calls for, high-quality, compatible development, mixed use, and high-quality residential apartments, and that's kind of what we're doing. We're also not going to have any impact because we know sensitivity to schools. We have no more than, it's 1- and 2-bedroom units. There will be no 3-bedroom units. This is really, I guess the motto would be, what we're doing is trying to service people who are looking to downsize and not downgrade. And I say that there's a use for everyone. I think what Arthur said was important is giving people who want to rent by choice but not by necessity. And we feel this would be a fine amenity. I'd be happy when Mr. Collins is up. I'd really happy to answer any questions with regard to their experience, with regard to the quality of the developments they do, and questions in particular with regard to the elevations, floor plans, and anything else you'd like about the project.
How much of the parking is covered and some of it's outside?
300 or so cars that are gonna be allocated to the, eventually, there's about 110 or so that are, yeah, including some tuck under parking, and so, again, the grades that Ray referred to creates a challenge for, getting these buildings, on the site, but also it's actually an opportunity, because it allows us to create essentially an extended height foundation and provide parking, without having to build a parking structure.
Okay, so there are X number of parking spaces that are covered, tucked under, and any tenant that would like to utilize one of those will have a surcharge on top of their monthly rental fee.
Yep.
Okay. Commissioner Kelly, did you have a question?
I had the same question. I got the answer, thank you.
Okay, he has the same question. Could you just point out where on your particular plans you've got the documentation and the table as to how many apartments and what the number of buildings breakdown?
Unfortunately, it's on our site, that is, lost the signal, we got it back. I think it's on A1102.
Okay, I'll find that.
S1.
Is there another?
Approximately 60%, 65% of the apartments will be one bedroom or a studio.
Okay.
Approximately 35%.
Yeah. Okay, that's been located. It was a,
A102.
A102, and it was a separate, document that was put on the website.
Yeah, it's in the lower left-hand corner there.
This one has the, chart going across the top.
In the larger building, there's 76 one-bedrooms and 42 two-bedrooms. The smaller buildings will be 6 studios, 53 one-bedrooms and 32 bedrooms. So basically, you have 136 one-bedrooms and 71. That's
Mr. Panico, do you have any
Yes.
questions?
Not at this time. I'm still looking at the drawings.
Okay, does any, Commissioner remotely have any questions before we move on? And anybody here?
Chairwoman, Commissioner Parkins?
Commissioner Parkins?
I have a couple questions in response to the comment made about the surcharge for underground and or covered parking. I think we have some experience. What happens in that scenario is that there's a lot of cars that park on the street with over close to 150 covered parking places that would be available for lieu of those people who choose not to pay the premium. There may be a lot of on-street parking. Has there been any thought given to that is one question I have. And the second question I have is, understanding that the applicant is not the owner of the property, just wondering if there has been any commentary around previous attempts by the current owner to lease the space out for light industrial as it is currently zoned for.
I'll hit that first. Our client, Mr. Garrity, who has owned this property for a number of years, is an aggressive commercial real estate developer. He owns a few properties in Trumbull, a few in Shelton. Is a very aggressive developer who has had numerous tenants trying to get to this site. Physical challenges of the location are very difficult. Both of the parking down in a basin that would basically be about a 30-foot high difference in grade for employees to get up to a building. It was a very challenged site that for industrial purposes, and certainly for distribution, as far as not having depth from the building for large cars to be able to large vehicles to load and unload. Then you have the parking below. So it's funny, what ends up being very detrimental and a real impediment to leasing from an industrial base has ended up being something that can work advantageous to a residential developer like Mr. Collins, because he can take advantage, as we talked about, of that difference in grade and provide an extended foundation to provide parking. One thing you can't do in an industrial property, nobody wants to park cars, trucks, or vehicles in a garage or in a parking garage that's 50 feet away. However, we can take advantage of that situation in a residential basis. So there's a very much, this property has been marketed heavily through national realtors. Mr. Garrity owns a few million square feet, very aggressive commercial developer, and has had no pleasure in having this property vacant for the last 5 to 7 years.
Attorney Rilla, I want to just make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying that the current owner has been marketing this site, but a drawback of the site has been that the parking for tenants is in a lower elevation and it's some...
Building sits up.
Right.
The lot, if you can also recognize, is not very deep.
Right.
So it's very difficult that you have this length of this building that the trucks need, turning rate, large trucks need, which most of the stuff now from warehousing is big distribution facilities.
Mm-hmm.
And this really doesn't fit for a distribution facility, it fits for a manufacturing facility. We all know what's kind of happened with manufacturing, light manufacturing in the state of Connecticut. So if you can't lease it for a distribution facility because the trucks don't have enough depth for the building to come in, make the turns, back up the trailers, load the trailers, and leave. And then on top of that, the employees have to park down at the bottom of the hill, because if you remember the building sits almost right up to the grade, and almost overhangs, so that anybody who works there has to basically walk a block 30 feet up the grade to get into the building.
Attorney Rizzo, I bring that up only because of the fact that stone's throw away is 710 Bridgeport Avenue, the site of PerkinElmer. Before it was PerkinElmer and whatever predecessor, about 25 years ago, it was Phillips Medical. I happened to have worked in that building for 5 years. I parked in that lower lot that borders Bridgeport Avenue and walked up the staircase to get into the main entrance. And so did a lot of other people. So I don't see that as an argument as to why this is a marketable building.
From a marketing standpoint, you have, as I said, the lack of depth of the lot.
Right.
The building situates the lot. The building, for it to be adapted into a distribution center, doesn't really work.
Mm-hmm.
You're asking me detrimental. Times have changed a lot, too. It's hard to get, you go to a gym, and it doesn't make any sense that a gym, people think there's no parking if they can't get a spot right next to the building, even though they're going to get on a treadmill and run 5 miles, but they circle and circle the driveway. So, in a very demanding market, which it really is now, in a very limited market when it comes to manufacturing, these types of issues are impediments to leasing. I can tell you, Mr. Garrity has no intention of leaving this property vacant for 5 years so he could come before you with a residential project. This is a mixed use, it's consistent with your master plan, and we think it works very well.
Can I just ask one other thing?
I just want to address the owner's intent. And,
right, I understand.
And he also sought out, since he's going to retain ownership of the commercial building, he wanted to make sure that he had a top-notch developer that would be able to provide a quality building that would not have a negative impact on his existing facility and his existing tenants, yet would still provide and knock down the value or the leasability of that.
Okay, Attorney Rizzo, can I just ask, has the current owner ever explored buying some property so that that it abuts, so that the traffic, especially for truck traffic, could access the property from the rear?
The problem is that is wetlands in the rear, I believe, and there's Progress Drive off the back. It's kind of a landlocked piece. There's really no way to get there without, I believe, because one of the reasons we're pending in wetlands is there's small wetlands in the rear of the property.
So from Progress Drive,
there's really no access to Progress Drive. There's multiple buildings there, and you still end up with a difference in grades. And one of the beauties of this that works for Mr. Collins is he's not putting up a residential facility with an industrial feel. You're gonna have a building to the north, but you're gonna have surrounded by woods, next to a retail center, which is within walking distance, and probably one of the largest retail centers in town that is under construction across the street. So although it's zoned industrial, this will not have much of an industrial feel. And basically, we think what it'll do is complete the bookends of Parrot Drive. Parrot Drive is already a mixed-use street. You have the Renaissance at the top, and you have another quality building at the back, and then you have some businesses in the middle. And one of the things that I really want to address, which I think is important, that the neighbor brought out, Mr. Collins made sure he addressed, is you notice we don't have any opposition. The neighbor next door had concerns and brought to the commission's attention about people walking, that this does get a lot of walking, because people walk from Renaissance or walk from the corporate tower down to get lunch. And that's one of the attractions of this for us. We will be providing sidewalk the length of our property on Parrot Drive, not just in front of the residential facility, but all the way up. So where the people who own the little factory next door, they're tenants, the people on Renaissance, or from Renaissance or from the corporate towers, will be able to now take sidewalks down that hill to get to the bottom of our property, where there'll be a crosswalk that'll take you over to connect to the Fountain Square property. So this really gives you residential bookends on Parrot Drive that are well secluded, no negative visual impact. In fact, I think it's going to be very much a visual improvement, and add a walkability factor that's currently not enjoyed for some of the other larger projects that have been proposed before.
How did the applicant arrive at his unit count?
Excuse me?
How did the applicant arrive at his unit count as to, why did he go for 206 units?
Usually it all boils back to parking, and so the parking really, sort of generated what the density could be. Also, as a developer, we know that the range of 180 to 220 is sort of, the optimal range for apartment management and so forth, similar to like a hotel kind of thing. You have the same amount of staff, you manage a hotel with 110 people, 110 of them says, 180, that kind of mentality. So that's what the control is.
Okay.
It also provide, as you talked about on-site management and the amenities that we're providing, the density that goes with it.
Okay, and, was there a second point that you wanted to, that is,
I don't know if I talked myself through two questions, or if there's, the Commissioner still had an additional question that I didn't answer, so.
Commissioner Parkin?
No, Madam Chair, the question was regarding the premium for paying for parking, and people, as a result, will park on the street, as we have well experienced here.
Yeah, this is a totally different situation. First of all, as we evidenced by Mr. Sullivan's charts, and we've discussed before you today, we well exceed the parking requirements required. With regard to payment, the question becomes whether you call the rent not $1,000 a month, or do you call it $1,100 for the apartment with parking. So people can say they're charged or they're not charged with parking. A lot of these apartments, if you'll notice, they may say all amenities included. No fees, no parking fees, but the rent is like real estate. If you're in a corner unit and you're looking at all the woods, your rent may be higher than the guy, and parking's included. Your rent may be higher than the guy who is up in the corner looking at another building. So the issue that, Commissioner, that you seem to be worried about is how are you going to end up in a situation where people don't want still the closest parking for them will be on our lot. It just won't be underneath the building. We have more than enough parking for not only for every site, every vehicle there. We have I think we exceed what the regulation would require by over 60 or 70 spaces in peak time, and would still give us more than enough parking if we had 10 or 20% allocated for visitor use. So where you worry about the parking falling from on-street, on-site to on-street parking, is where you don't have enough parking on-site or the parking on site is not, convenient. All of our outdoor parking is around the building, so there would be no reason for somebody to park out on Parrot Drive or anywhere else, hike up Parrot Drive, down Parrot Drive, walk through our building, sits back probably, I want to say, 100 feet at least, walk through an amenity area to then park at the building where they can park for free. And it's secure. That's the other position why I don't see anybody ever parking on the street versus taking their free on-site parking next to the building, which is more than adequate to handle all the uses on site. As you can see, it greatly exceeded, the parking we're providing greatly exceeded, I think it was 411 spaces, and at our peak, we had, 345 spaces maybe used at one time. I'm taking that from my memory. But there's more than adequate visitor parking, and unit parking.
Those parking spaces you were naming include that 110 covered spaces.
Yes.
So if those are underutilized, that's where the concern comes in.
We still have an additional 60 or 70 spaces more than we would be required, and even Mr. Sullivan said that his requirements were higher. I mean, the hard part is when somebody says they're paying, is there a premium for parking? Either you can pay for it separately or there's a premium typically attached for reserve parking in their rent. So I think Mr. Collins was being honest with you and saying there is some kind of premium attached, whether it's separately paid or within their rent to park. But that's the most convenient, the most accessible, and the most abundant parking is still on-site, and more than enough on-site, even without the covered parking, with the covered parking being underused to accommodate all of our residents and their guests.
Mhm.
I mean, the numbers call that out. I can understand if we needed on the dot 411 spaces, and you're saying, well, wait a second, but you're marshaling these spaces inside, and what if people don't want to pay for them? Now you don't have, we have more than, we exceed the uses that would be required. So we don't see that as an issue.
What is the ratio between covered and not covered parking?
With that,
Mr. Pianico,
What is the-
the ratio between covered and
so
uncovered
I
parking?
thought there's, what's that? About a third is covered.
110. The other thing to mention is that generally in this, with this type of property, the tenants like to know that their space is designated, and they have choice. So some people might have a choice of a tuck-under, kind of a carport type thing, which we have, or a garage, might be priced differently, or they don't mind having a second car that's outside, be willing to. But each one of these are numbered, and what we normally do is assign them to the tenants.
Mhm.
And we give them a mix of different options for not only the apartments, the orientation, but also the parking.
Yeah, I don't think I would look at having covered parking as a negative. I think it's very much positive.
Mhm.
And it's kind of, it's an amenity. And certainly, as you've seen, you have a few projects that have that have been approved that have just not any covered parking. And it is an attraction to people. I think it'll help us differentiate ourselves from the market, certainly for some tenants. Certainly for people who are downsizing and are used to parking in their garage and not having to deal with bad weather when they come from the grocery store, when they come from the store, just getting in and out of their vehicle.
Mhm. Mr. Rossetti, did you have a closing comment?
Yeah, it's just kind of the second what all the commissioners have said. I think the feeling is we just want to make sure that in-ground parking is utilized. So whatever way you can do to ensure that it is utilized. We have had, and I deal with issues all the time. Landlords have that additional fee for parking, and people, especially, it's like, now you're tight on cash, okay, I'm gonna go park down the block and walk in. We just wanna make sure that that space is utilized. I know the numbers, you can play the numbers game, it looks like there'll be, like, if, again, and I think people definitely appreciate in-ground parking having their car covered, I certainly do. If, like devil's advocate, those spaces were not utilized, you know, and if you're in building A on the south side, and then the only spaces, you gotta turn it off.
I did, I'm giving it to you.
Is it mine? That's weird. If, you know, if you're living in the south side, the only space available on the north side, you might say, oh, well, it's easier for me to park at the street. Again, that's a devil's advocate kind of scenario, but we just want to make sure those are utilized. And if you can, find a way to relay to the commission that those spaces are going to be used, preferably as part of the event. I understand the point that they want to have choices, but, you know, I think there's a way that you can illustrate that.
The other good thing about that, Mr. Rossetti, is this site doesn't lend itself to on-street parking.
There are still many places in town that do not let themselves to on-street parking, that people park in the middle of the street.
Right, but in this instance, we have exceeded the requirements by such a great amount, and the condition of approval hasn't been. When you deal with the parking.
This is Commissioner Parkins. If you look at drawing A100, that's where the ratio of parking is, and it's more than half of the amount of parking places are under cover. And so to Mr. Rossetti's point, I think whatever can be done to assure the commission that you are either going to assign so many spaces, and I mean, if you have 200 people that choose not to pay premium for parking, you don't have enough outside parking for them. So, you know, you would have to think of a way to regulate that to ensure that there is enough people taking advantage, more than enough people taking advantage, because naturally you would want to have the outside spaces also remain for visitor parking. So, and I know you're saying, I understand the point that you're saying it meets our regulations. In a perfect world, it meets the regulations, right? People have a party, they have 10 guests over, especially at the pool, however that's regulated. I have a lot of experience visiting apartment complexes, and I see what happens. So I just, to Mr. Rossetti's point.
We could agree to a condition that there be no separately paid for parking. This way, you understand if the rent for the unit will decide where they go, so that we can't rent it, and that would be the conditional approval to address all of your concerns. This way, you don't have a situation where somebody can rent a unit and not have a place to park, which I think is what you're concerned about, that you have everybody loading in and not being able to afford the parking. If they can't afford the rent that comes with the parking, then the unit stays vacant, so you don't have to worry about those drivers. So we'll agree to a conditional approval, there'll be no separate charge for parking in connection with the project. And I think that would alleviate your concerns, because then if the rent's too high, they're not going to lease there, you don't have to worry about parking.
If you're thinking that some apartments may be priced to include that underground parking.
It's priced based on numerous things: size, location, number of bedrooms, size of bathrooms, all sorts of different options that come. The key to solving your concern is if the unit was priced higher because it included an underground parking space, then it's not going to be leased, so you don't have to worry about those spaces.
Time to wrap up.
So the rents will control the occupancy, which is what controls the parking, which gives you the level of comfort that we're not going to have a full building and nobody parking inside. Because we can't have a full building and not have people parking inside by not charging separately for the parking. Does that make sense, Mr. Rossetti? And we would agree to that as a condition. Then you have the control that you want, that we don't become a commercial parking garage and charge somebody separately saying, hey, look, you're gonna pay premium if you're gonna be in here. If we try to do that, the apartment's gonna remain vacant. So we'll have 110 vacant units if the rent doesn't work that would include parking. Commissioner Mata, does that make more sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably other ways you could do it. You could do it on a first come, first served basis or whatever, but just do it so that those spaces are utilized.
I think that will be occupancy, then the nice thing about that, Commissioner Otto, and I'm the commissioner who brought this up, you don't have a disconnect between occupancy and vehicles. And I think that's really what your concern was, and we're happy to agree to that as a condition of approval.
Okay, is there anybody else remotely or here in the auditorium from the commission that has any further questions, comments, or concerns they would like to bring out at this time?
This is Commissioner Laskos.
Go ahead, Commissioner Laskos.
On one of the traffic ones that showed 411 parking spots, and on the print A100, it shows 275. Can you confirm which one's correct?
The 411 on the total site is correct.
But 275 specifically for the residential, correct?
So when they go to calculate how much the demand would be, that's how they calculate that versus commercial. But the total amount of spaces available on site, because there also is a shared parking concept, is 411 spaces.
Right.
Okay. Okay, does that answer your question, Attorney Laskos?
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right, final call. Any other questions, comments, or concerns from the commission? Okay, does any member of the commission feel that additional information from the applicant is required? Is there any reason why we could not close the public hearing for this application?
Mr. Chairman, I think we're still waiting. Two things. One, if I could just
go ahead.
A quick summary for you before we
go right ahead.
Well, we can't close the meeting because I think we're still waiting for a report from wetlands.
Right.
Even though we're not filling any wetlands, touching any wetlands, or disturbing any wetlands, we're still waiting for that report since we are within a certain part, within a regulated portion of a regulated area.
Mm-hmm.
If you can just indulge me for a couple minutes, I'd like to go through this. This is a very important project to my client, a very important project development, it's a very important project. And there's been that 1,000-pound gorilla sitting out there. This commission just went through a detailed presentation. I don't want to say it's across the street, but it's on the other side of Bridgeport Avenue for Elmer. The difference is why we think our project separates from a lot of the criticism the commission had of that project. First of all, and also with regard to, I think the commission has some concerns about the impact on downtown. As you heard from Mr. Collins, you've heard from me, I can't tell you how many apartment projects there is a difference between the downsizer and there's a difference between the person who wants to stay in Shelton, wants to downsize, but doesn't necessarily want to change their environment. They still like a suburban feel, but don't want to necessarily live downtown. They like to have their covered parking. They like to have some amenities. They like to be able to walk into the city. They don't want to walk out onto a sidewalk where they don't have the ability to enjoy some amenities and different things. So we believe we're seeking to address the people who are currently living in Shelton and want to downsize. People who have connections to Shelton, who want to come see their grandkids or don't want to own a home in Shelton or don't want to own a home. We're not we're going after a different age group, a different marketplace, and we believe it's certainly warranted in this situation, and the location is perfect for it. We also have the ability, a walkability issue, which is different than was across the street. First of all, we're not introducing residential on a street. We are basically bookending the street. You already have high quality, the highest of high quality residential at the top of Parrot Drive, and we want to bring the same quality to the bottom of Parrot Drive. We want to increase the walkability of Parrot Drive, which you all know is from neighbors, from our clients, from demand and your own personal resources, that we are going to put sidewalks the entire length of our property on Parrot Drive, which basically is about 3/4 of the length of Parrot Drive is our frontage. And it will take down and introduce into a walkway that'll put you down to Fountain Square. You'll be able to go to, Five Guys and the other little commercial space down below. Our type of tenants are looking for privacy. They're looking for quietness. It's not as quiet. It's much more quiet. It's much more suburban than in this community than it will be in downtown. We are looking at two different rent renters. This is not apples for apples, it's providing the options that this commission looks for under their master plan. When you look at our plan versus Perkin-Elmer, we don't have any conflict of uses. We're gonna have a separate entrance for the residential on the south side of the property. The commercial property will be, it's almost if it's a different property, that it will have a separate commercial entrance to the north of the site. So there's no conflicting of driveways. There's no conflicting of uses. But for it, if there ever is some overflow, we may have the ability to use some of the southern parking on the northern portion of the property. We have a history of residential on Parrot Drive. As I said, Renaissance, probably the most successful residential project probably around. It's of its highest quality, it thrives, it does very well there. We believe we can do the same thing. And then also provide that connectivity for the people of the Renaissance and the Corporate Drive, so that when they do walk, they can walk and proceed safely down to all the great retail uses that you folks have passed over the years along Bridgeport Avenue. We will not eat up any traffic capacity on Bridgeport Avenue. We believe, first of all, we're taking away a building. You saw that the amount of traffic that Mr. Sullivan showed you, would be no increase in level of service. So we believe we can separate ourselves very well from other projects. I don't think we have a negative effect on downtown. We don't compete with downtown. I think we're much different than the Perkin-Elmer site because we're not moving into an industrial area. We're moving into an area that's already got a couple 100,000 square feet of residential property on the Renaissance, that we're able to segregate ourselves topographically on our site from the current industrial property, which is also a very nice building at the upper top. Had no neighborhood opposition. I can imagine your Perkin-Elmer applications went on for a long time. You had very vociferous opposition to the site. And then the other thing is we're going to help, which is in your land use plan, we're going to help drive your economic base. Our taxes, the taxes on this property will go up 4 to 5-fold based on the apartments. It'll bring hundreds of thousands of dollars increase in taxes to your grand list. And I guess in closing, I tried to figure out what my summary would be, and I figured, let's just read from your future land use plan. And your future land use plan talks about mixed-use economic growth areas. And if you just give me a second, I'll read this paragraph. Areas that are substantially vacant or underutilized, which is our current half of our property, served by or can be provided with adequate roads, and which can be provided with necessary public utilities and services, which we have. We don't dump directly out the Park Avenue onto Bridgeport Avenue. We will be serviced by a light, and we have the longest queue that you can possibly have of most of Parrot Drive coming on to Bridgeport Avenue. Such areas are intended to be development which one or an appropriate combination of a variety of economic development uses that will result in a positive economic impact on the grand list and impose minimal burden on the city services and municipal infrastructure. We're limiting all of our units to 1 and 2 bedrooms. We don't see any impact on the infrastructure. You don't have to take care of our roads. You don't have to landscape our properties. And there'll be no kids for you to educate in your schools. Such uses can range from multifamily residential and senior citizen services and facilities to restricted commercial, light industrial, business, and corporate offices and port of hospitality facilities. To assure quality, compatible development, all uses should be authorized only by the application of a PDD, which is what we are before you tonight. So I would just like you to follow your future land use plan. We think we fit it to a T. We think our uses are distinguishable to downtown. We're distinguishable from other projects that have been previously rejected for a number of reasons. And we will make this probably the most productive, pretty site. It'll hopefully, as one thing that's taught us about COVID, you've developed this tremendous retail corridor. One thing that's happening in retail is it's being stressed by people just living at home, ordering out. The restaurants are suffering, the small retailers are suffering. This, we believe, can be a shot in the arm for those restaurants. We'll be able to walk to eat. You won't have to call Grubhub and everybody else can walk to the bottom of the hill. They can walk to the restaurants. They can support, within a very short distance, many of your local retailers. And on top of that, not have any negative impact on your services, yet they provide a huge bonus to your municipal tax base. For all those reasons, I would respectfully request this commission grant this application. I'd be happy to answer any other questions, and then I'd be happy to get out of your way, and you don't have to listen to me anymore for the rest of the evening. But thank you very much for your patience, your time. And I gotta tell you, Chairman and Commission, I really appreciate your sitting here. The difference in trying to do these the total Zoom hearings are very difficult on the commissioners, it's very difficult on the presenters. Appreciate your time and making yourself available during the day, because this is a real bonus for us to be able to do this. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Okay, so is there a motion to continue the public hearing?
Make the motion.
Okay, there's a motion from Commissioner Amato to continue. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second from Commissioner Kelly. So we'll do a roll call on continuing the public hearing on a motion made by Commissioner Amato, seconded by Commissioner Kelly. Commissioner Ticky?
Aye.
Commissioner Amato? Commissioner Parkins?
I just have a question. Are we only keeping the hearing open because of the wetlands approval? Or,
Yes.
report?
And Mr. O'Neill, clarify that?
We're waiting on the engineering report.
We're waiting on the engineering report, according to Mr. O'Neill.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Okay, then
So-
aye to keep the public hearing open. Yes, aye.
Okay. Commissioner Kelly?
Aye.
And Commissioner Lascos?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, so this will be left open, and a new date will be set by Mr. Rossetti. So is there no other business for the commission, so is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn from Commissioner Kelly, is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Amato has seconded. A vote on that, Commissioner Lascos? Motion to adjourn?
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly?
Aye.
Commissioner Parkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Amato? Commissioner Ticky?
Aye.
And chair votes aye, and the commission, meeting is, adjourned as of 12 noon.
Thank you very much, folks.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Oh, the bling, bling, bling. Do you know when the wetlands is gonna discuss